Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donato Cabrera. I'm the music director of the California Symphony and the Las Vegas Philharmonic. And this episode is a super fun episode because it's of music wise because it's the first one where I'm doing this live at an undisclosed location in California with my great friend and composer Mason Bates. Welcome, Mason.
Great to be here. I've always enjoyed these, and you know, we decided to meet outside in the backyard so that we could do this without having to have Zoom heads floating around.
Mason, we've known each other for a long time. One of the things that, aside from your great music making, great composing, you've been such an advocate for what many orchestras are sort of scrambling to put together right now in institutions, which is really to have a real experience aside from the fact. And listen, we both love. Uh, the orchestral experience. We love what an orchestra can create, but there's so much more around what happens or what can happen at an orchestra concert. And what you have created over the years, we'll talk specifically about Mercury Soul, but when you've been composer in residence of the Chicago Symphony and now currently with the Kennedy Center, you've created these really immersive experiences. Talk to us a little bit about the background, what how you came up with this idea, where you why you saw this need.
Well, I'm a composer, so my main job is writing music for orchestras and chamber ensembles. But as I would go to different places like the Kennedy Center, the Chicago Symphony, or San Francisco Symphony, I would start to imagine how we could possibly make the experience, kind of the frame around the music, a little more inviting. And that really could look like more of a theatrical experience. I think it could have much more kind of cinematic program notes that are presented between pieces. Could really make use of a lot of the dead spaces of a concert to kind of educate people in a non-threatening way. To me, the big goal of all that is to protect our programming freedom. We want to be able to play the music that is challenging from all eras, including now. And if you can educate the audience and make the experience more inviting, you definitely, I think, have a more forgiving listenership. And you definitely open the doors for new listeners from different backgrounds who can have their minds blown with this music, but might be a little turned off by the lighting at half and all of the concert hall politics about when to clap. I think the exact things we're doing can be preserved and made even more compelling by thinking about concert experience.
uh, what one of the I've been lucky enough at your invitation to conduct both at the Music Now with the Chicago Symphony, which is what you were a part of while being the resident there, and at KC Jukebox. And what struck me was something so special was that you could really sense the fact that the audience was taking part in the experience. Wasn't sort of a one-way street, which can often be okay for us performers on stage. They clap at the right time, and they the audience is appreciative of what the music they experience. But I sensed at both concerts while I was conducting that the audience was truly engaged in sort of a, I don't know, in a visceral way. And I think that what some of the things you have brought, talk to us a little bit about this idea of these these visual program notes, which is such a fantastic idea. Where did that come from?
Well, the program book is a way to learn so much about what you're hearing, and we all are geeks when we read them because we get excited about what we're going to hear. The program book really hasn't changed over like hundreds of years, and there's so much great writing and so much great thinking that goes into them. It's just the format. So I have gotten really interested in working with projectionists and program note annotators and videographers to create a kind of immersive program note experience. What does that mean? Immersive program note experience. how is that different from you go to a concert and there's like a giant screen, it's a drive-in movie kind of vibe. Um, you have to kind of integrate the screen into the architecture of the space. So you might have more like wall mapped projections, so you can just project on uneven surfaces. You want to get away from the sense that there's a screen looming over the experience. You also want to keep things pretty short. So, there are all kinds of moments when a piano is being moved on, or, you know, when there's a set change, that you can have an interview with a musician in the orchestra about this incredible offstage solo in the Mahler. So that evolved in my classical music club show called Mercury Soul, which is a San Francisco based organization that does club shows. And we've also worked with orchestras all over the country. And that was first a way to get around the situation when you're in a club and you don't have a program book. I've since evolved to really believe that this could be the way we hear, we experience all of our program information. And I call it kind of ambient information because, again, the production of it is kind of important. We're all experts in production, even if we don't realize it. We see movies, we know exactly what is good and what's clunky. And you really have to work hard to make it integrate seamlessly. And so that's often looking at the space, what can happen in the space with the lighting. Sometimes there's some things with sound design to kind of soften the silences. It's a lot you can do. The people that have pioneered it, I think, Michael Tilson Thomas has been great at New World Symphony. There's definitely some phenomenal things happening in places that you might not expect. The Sioux City Symphony. There's an amazing conductor there, and Ryan has gotten all kinds of creativity involved. The California Symphony has done a lot of great things with integrating information. So it can happen. It doesn't have to have huge budgets. And I am certain that it is the way we can protect our freedom to program some of the really deep music that we want to hear and not have to go, okay, we have to do this model of concerto, overture concerto symphony, or we have to do this pops piece. There's a lot of great music that we need to hear that I think if we can bring the audience into the experience, that can really help.
Tell us a little bit about the background. I want before we play this great video of Mercury Soul. Tell us about how Mercury Soul started, and we've heard a little bit about why it exists. But was it a group of folks, a group of individuals came together that had like-minded thoughts about the concert experience? Was it something you had been thinking about for a while? Give us a little bit of a background of Mercury Soul.
Well, Mercury Soul was founded by Benjamin Schwartz, a phenomenal conductor who was the resident with the San Francisco Symphony and now conducts all over Europe. Phenomenal, charismatic conductor. Ann Patterson is a set designer and a visual artist who does kind of installations. She's now doing so many things beyond concert music that her relationship was really in the beginning. Um, that was the origin of it, and I DJ a lot of kind of club shows, and it started out as more trip hop and down tempo. Now it's more techno and house, and I felt that there was a way to integrate the instrumental music that we love with the inherently instrumental music of electronic dance music, or electronica is maybe a little more accurate. None of it has vocals in it, and so it can integrate in electronic dance music. Again, electronic is a little bit more broad. That is a texture and rhythm and harmony based music, meaning there's no lead singer, no lyrics. So it can work together. The origins really were in clubs, and the way that we've expanded now in the COVID moment is to take the immersive experience of a Mercury Soul concert and transform it into something that's so compelling digitally that even if the sound is off, it should work. We really want it to look captivating, because we've all seen wonderfully passionate performances in bedrooms. I've been a part of that, and I don't know if that's going to really keep people's attention. So we have now expanded into doing production consulting and creating our own digital series.
So, what are we going to see in this video?
This is the opening 3 minutes of Mercury Soul Cathedral. St. Joseph's Cathedral is a phenomenal historic cathedral in San Francisco that was condemned because it got hit by the earthquake in Loma Prieta, and then this visionary designer named Ken Folk came in and transformed it into a society for the arts and a club. So I've been associated with this organization, and I thought, man, this is a huge space where we could have not only beautiful meditative music playing, such as Debussy Cathedral, Sunken Cathedral, or wonderful like partitas by Bach, all the way to Indian classical music and Chinese folk music. And we can also feature the art and architecture of this space. So here's the opening segment of it. We always begin with a little bit of DJing. This is Shana Evanuk playing violin. And then we go into Debussy Sunken Cathedral.
Thanks, Maggie.
Sorry to just cut Claude Debussy off. You saw in that how there's a bit of a kind of ambient electronic intro with the amazing Shana Evanuk playing violin. That was an original piece that actually had some origins in a piece I wrote for the California Symphony called Tectonic Plates. And you saw how going from the end of the opening DJ segment to Cathedral, there was kind of like a travel. We traveled. Um, it's a little challenging. We're in a medium where you want to feature the subject, the person playing. But that can be visually a little bit repetitive if it's the entire time. So we thought, why don't we use the first minute of the Sunken Cathedral to kind of walk all the way from the opening of that space through the furniture and the art, look at a book that has illuminated manuscripts, and we kind of superimpose some titles. That's the kind of production that I think can really animate something in our world without stepping on it.
I completely agree, and I just love the production value of this video and the others that you've released so much, because it's not that big of a leap for artists, for musicians, for composers, for ensembles like the Las Vegas Philharmonic or the California Symphony to create create the production level that is necessary to create a video like this. I think it's just a matter of realizing that that talent's out there, basically everywhere that where in which we work, and sort of this idea of collaboration. Because like you said, we all know what a good movie looks like. We all know what production actually is. It's just a matter of maybe speaking a slightly different language than what we're used to.
Yeah. Well, the thing that was fortunate for us at Mercury Soul was that our executive director Matthew Ebisuzaki not only is a mind freak musician, he went to Curtis trumpet, and but he also worked in commercial film. I have done a fair amount of work in recent years with film, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, the key is the storyboard. You really have to think about what are you seeing, how are you getting from one thing to the next, and I really like what you said. This is within reach of anybody. It doesn't have to be overproduced. This was a pretty lean crew because of the distancing guidelines. Um, so you want to think about what are you trying to communicate here. In this series, we can talk about production all night, but we were trying to kind of create a balm for the moment without having to explicitly say it. It's pretty tough times, and we chose meditative and mystical classical music with offshoots into other cultures and even other genres like electronica, because we felt like it would match the space. If you were doing this with a different musical ensemble in a different space, maybe you would have something completely different. I think it's important to think through those things, think through those transitions. How can you integrate information into the space? You saw a little bit of that. You saw the names of the performers. You can do more. That was actually kind of hard because it was so beautifully three-dimensional. But you can do a lot more. And I look to a world, hopefully a year from now, when we're all back and doing things together live. But there's a parallel universe where what's happening in the concert hall at the Las Vegas Philharmonic is so well produced that we can also film it and stream it and have a kind of a second reality of it. It doesn't have to be one or the other. The key to linking them is the production. However, as soon as you say that, you have to remember that you have to have substance, and you really want to be presenting something that's as deep as what we do. And I do think that production and experience are going to be the keys to protecting that, which is something that almost no other art form can offer in such a special way, that deep listening experience.
I think that the one thing that we forget that we have at our disposal is this incredible 1500 years worth of content. We don't have to come up with a new product or a new something to sell, because we already have that inherent in what we do. So it's a matter of marrying, like you've just said, marrying this incredible amount of content, which is when I create a concert program of music, I do that. That's what I do as the music director, and then taking that one step further with production value.
And there is new. There's an imperative to have new voices from different backgrounds, and you all have done it so well at California Symphony. I think there's an American piece on almost every program. Um, there are absolutely phenomenal pieces being written every day right now by composers that we need to hear from, people from different backgrounds who can bring a new light. Also, there are just some kick-ass pieces by Janacek or whatnot that you're like, why isn't this played more often? Is it because the marketing department nixed that because they don't like all the accents over his consonants? They don't recognize it. There's a lot of great music, and one thing, I'm not even going to use the phrase silver lining because there's not a whole lot of silver lining about this current moment, but one interesting development is that it's shattering the way orchestras think about programming, at least right now. And so the chamber ensembles, they're pieces for, like small orchestra. You see a lot more different names. You see, Jesse Montgomery, you see some really cool stuff being programmed across the country. And hopefully this openness to shattering the model will inform the future.
Well, I think that's what's so wonderful about the last few months, now that orchestras are starting to whether it's online programming or in Europe, we're starting to see concerts happening again, is out of necessity. They're looking at all of this repertoire for 9 musicians, 15 musicians, 23 musicians, aside from the Mozart or Haydn symphonies or the Bach Brandenburg Concerti. There's so much repertoire that an orchestra would have never dreamed of programming, but now because we have to, because of the limitations and the amount of people that we can have on stage and in the audience, we're we are the musicians are discovering this unknown world of repertoire. So it is like you said, a silver lining, if you can call it that, today.
Oh my God! Don't say silver lining. There's nothing silver about any of this. Hey, but can we? Let's just geek out for a second.
Yeah.
So one of the key things about that, let's just get into the nitty gritty about Mercury Soul Cathedral, which you can see at on our website at mercurysoul.com. You see the whole thing. It's like about 4 episodes. How to get from one section to the other. And so I've got a little brief thing about another section. We go from Sunken Cathedral by Debussy to some Indian classical music performed by Arun Saigal and Vineet Gopal, phenomenal musicians in the Bay Area here. And so again, we wanted to make the viewer understand the vastness of the cathedral that we were filming in. So we wanted to go from one space, which was like kind of the you know the area of the altar where at the front, all the way to a little salon. And so this next 1 minute video shows a little bit how we transverse those spaces. Well, so it doesn't look like much, but to make those transitions happen, you really have to think through it. So, I think if you're doing this with your orchestra, um, storyboarding is key. It's kind of hard to do. I mean, I know there are a lot of digital departments in all these great organizations. One of the reasons Mercury Soul is reaching out to help different orchestras kind of consult is that it's harder than it looks. To really make something connect, to make the the substance of what you're doing, kind of animate on screen, without stepping on it is a little bit challenging. A lot of things came up in that production wise, how to time things, how to get the audio, how to do this, do that, steady cams. There's a lot of interesting graphics to get we had to reframe some of the words in those books. Um, I find that fascinating. And what does it allow you to do? You can go from Claude Debussy to Indian classical music, and that might be sort of a hard transition in normal times. Shouldn't be, but it could be a little bit jarring. But to have that space to get from one to the next is key.
You've mentioned a little bit about your background DJing, and we've already mentioned, of course, your incredible accomplishment so far as a composer. But you have been involved with quite a few interesting projects in the last few years. You've mentioned soundtracks. Um, Tell us a little bit how that first started. What was that something you had always sort of envisioned yourself becoming a part of, and where has that led to now?
Well, I've only written one actual film score. That was a great movie that not a lot of people saw, by Gus Van Sant, called The Sea of Trees, starring Matthew McConaughey and Naomi Watts and Ken Watanabe. It's an incredible dream to have a director as visionary as Gus hear my music, reach out, ask me to demo some scenes. It was a really hard scene. It was like a 7 minute dialogue-less scene of Matthew McConaughey wandering through this forest. Um, and I really responded to the pacing of it, to kind of almost play against picture to keep things really moving along since it's such a quiet contemplative piece. Um, so that was how I got thinking about scoring a new project that was supposed to premiere this year, but due to the asteroid impact has been delayed, but it will come out. It's called Philharmonia Fantastique, and this is an example of um, sometimes if you can't find a sunny spot, make your own weather. And so I really got curious about this medium that has evolved right under our noses, which is film concerts. The Raiders of the Lost Ark, Home Alone, whatever, with live orchestra.
I mean, it's become such a phenomenon with basically all the major orchestras. They have their own series now of film concerts, and also many of the regional orchestras incredibly successful.
Yeah, and it's not exactly from our. It's not like the heart and soul of what we do, our core mission, but it does bring new people into the hall, and especially when you're doing really fine composers like John Williams or Johnny Greenwood, it's interesting. I thought it'd be nice to write something for that medium, and it seemed like the piece that would be most appropriate would be a piece about the making of the orchestra. You know, People like my brother who have heard me playing piano for years, but he's in the Marine Corps and he's got a whole franchise of oil change businesses in Virginia. He doesn't like actively listen to classical music. He may not know that there's some basic principles of how instruments are made that are phenomenally complicated, more complicated than the phones in our pocket, and certainly more development time. So I reached out to a mentor named Gary Rydstrom, who is a seven-time Oscar-winning sound designer, and for Steven Spielberg, and he's been a mentor for me with my own sound design, and told him about this idea. Gary has directed feature films and in animation, and so I said it'd be great to have a story about the making of the orchestra. And Gary brought in Jim Capobianco, an incredible animator from Pixar, now his own shop, Aerial Contrivance. So that project took about 2 years from conception to completion. And I think that at the end of the day, you have to think about what you're trying to communicate that's of substance. And for me in this film, the idea was to create something that would really be interesting for anybody of any background, orchestral musician to my brother. There's some other people. I don't want to put him on the end of the spectrum, but that would be both educational and entertaining in a kind of rhapsodic way. So that's the most recent big project, and some of the crew that worked on that, I brought over to the Mercury Soul Cathedral series.
I was lucky enough to see a screening of it at Skywalker Ranch, and one of the things that immediately struck me was that while there have been projects in the past, incredible pieces in the past that have tried to serve the purpose of introducing the instruments or the sections of the orchestra, of course, some of the more famous pieces are Peter and the Wolf, by Prokofiev, and Britain's Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra.
And Nat Stuckey's Young Composer is Dead is a recent addition.
Yes, and Nathaniel Stuckey's Composer is Dead, fantastic piece. And of course, and also the idea of Fantasia, which is in a way introducing classical music through animation. But talk about storyboarding. I mean, this whole project for you must have been so fascinating to see how your concepts became animated.
Yeah, well, maybe we should just see like a little 3-minute segment about it, just so we're not too abstract. We have a bit of a trailer, a bit of a making of behind the scenes of Philharmonie Fantastique, the making of the orchestra. Philharmonia Fantastique is a 25-minute journey inside the orchestra, a kind of concerto for orchestra where you get to go right up next to the instruments and inside them sometimes to see how they work. I decided that we should have each of the four families of the orchestra inhabit their own completely different kind of sound worlds, almost different kind of genres, to make them like four distinct tribes. And the reason we wanted to do that is to create a kind of dramatic tension between the four different tribes of the orchestra that has to be resolved by them coming together. And the way they ultimately come together is to learn to play each other's themes, to kind of speak each other's tongues. And that element of coming together, transcending the differences that they have, became a key inspiration for us as the piece unfolded. The piece began with a conversation between me and Gary Rydstrom of Lucasfilm and Skywalker Sound. Gary is a multi-Oscar winning sound designer for Steven Spielberg and also a director of animated films. I was amazed at those films' ability to blend music and animation in such a seamless way.
I love the idea of using film and animation in particular to visualize music, and Mason's music would be really fun to visualize. The unique part about this project is that the music and the film were created in parallel together. The first person I thought of trying to visualize how this could work was Jim Capobianco, who I worked with at Pixar and have known his work, including work that's very charming and emotional and expresses itself in a very pure way. I met with Jim, and it took about 3, maybe 4 seconds to talk him into doing this project.
Gary Rydstrom reached out to me. He mentioned he had this project he was developing with a composer named Mason Bates. And he said, we want to combine animation with a new symphony piece. We kind of came up with a style that's kind of hand-drawn 2D animation, but also mixed with live action. It was a really good push and pull because Gary and I would come up with some kind of concept to visualize the music and then start to develop it and show Mason. Mason would say we're missing certain elements that he would want to put in. We'd add those in and would always plus it and make it better.
We don't always think about the orchestra as a marvel of technology, but it very much is one of the best examples of interactive technology we have. Philharmonia Fantastique all comes together in the concert hall in a live performance for orchestra and animated film that takes the audience inside the instruments to see how they work.
Okay, so when someone goes to see a performance of this in a symphony hall and they sit down in their seat, what will they see in front of them?
Well, it's a 30-minute piece that probably most likely will occur in the concerto slot. Um, it's an animated film, so it's animated with some live action mixed in. So we have the story of a sprite. The first 5 minutes is kind of the creation of this sprite. The original script was about a little girl in a music room, and Jim Capobianco, our animation director, he was like, you really should think about something that's more imaginative than a human being, because that's what we can do in animation. So the orchestra kind of creates this sprite, which if you look closely is like a little badass superhero. Made each limb is like a different family. It's like a brass with like valves, and then this sprite will then go inside each family. We call them the tribes, and explore the instruments. It's a bit like a concerto for orchestra, where each section has its moment. Unlike the Britain, say, which is really that's the crown jewel. I mean, Peter and the Wolf is it's okay. It's a little long, but the Britain is just the perfect piece. Benjamin Britten, Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. That's all about one theme. This is organized. The unit is tribes, the four families. Why? We wanted to create a kind of conflict, kind of a tension between these sections that had to be resolved. Conflict is good for any kind of a dramatic medium, and helps a listener and a viewer kind of understand what's at stake. You can read a lot into that. the sprite is trying to figure out who it is. Um, it's trying to understand how it was created. The orchestra tribes can't really play together until they learn each to speak each other's tongues. Where does that point to? That points to the idea that the orchestra really, if you just look at it as a medium, is a really fascinating example of unity from diversity. In that, an oboe and a violin are about as different as people from different continents. They're really different technologically, sonically. Um, so we wanted to go a level up from the musical, technological, creative angle, and to really look at what a big theme of the orchestra is. And I know that whenever I see an orchestra, um, it's always just whatever's playing. I'm always so inspired because it's this marvelous synchronization of very different technologies, very different people, all working together in real time. And uh, I hope that the alien invasion happens soon. We need aliens to come and help us. I hope they enter the atmosphere over an outdoor orchestra concert, so they're like impressed, because it's a very impressive thing that the orchestra is really a great wonder of the world. So that's what we kind of wanted to present. You want to get a lot of information about the piece of the instruments without actually having to use words. That was another challenge that was fascinating to look at.
I think it's an absolutely phenomenal piece, and what's so wonderful is that you envision it not only as something that can be performed um, on a young person's concert, but it's actually it really can be ageless in that it can be on a subscription piece, a subscription concert as well, in that area where the concerto would often be.
Yeah, I mean, it was again until things changed a little bit. We had several orchestras programming it on the subscription concert series. Um, you know, it's really fascinating to anybody that the principle of this musical engineering, instrument engineering, is basically a resonating body, right? Changing the shape of the resonance, whether it be a string or a body of air or a drum head. Um, how to communicate that, you know? So, like in the brass section with the valves, we try to show. So this is getting to like, how do you write a piece? It's got to be driven by music in this one, because that's what it's about. But how do you get those ideas across? Well, you'll see, like shafts of air fly through a trombone, and as it's changing shape, you're hearing the different pitches come out. You see like a valve click and kind of shatter the air, and that makes a different pitch. Trying to communicate, the principles of engineering behind these instruments was a real goal. And so, what did that mean to me in my studio? That meant I had to create four very different themes for each tribe, each section, plus one for the sprite. It's a lot of material, a lot of content for a 30-minute piece. Um, Trying to create memorable musical material, themes that you can remember, but not just themes, also textures and rhythms. That's been a particular obsession of mine. My piece Mothership, which almost turns 10 this year. A lot of people I think would say it has a kind of catchiness to it. It doesn't really have a theme though. So it's like, what is it? And so you hear a lot, between the music of John Adams to um, Bela Bartok. It's like there's something you remember. What is it? And so trying to figure out what's memorable and how you create that is a very interesting challenge for me. And creating those different themes was key because how each one is transformed demonstrates the principles at work.
During this past week, I've posted some performances of your pieces that I've had the honor of conducting over the last decade or and more. And one of the more memorable moments during my time at the San Francisco Symphony was for sure the being involved with the world premiere of Mass Transmission. And I think back to those times where how you compared this uh, what you write about in Mass Transmission is sort of like the beginnings of the first Skype. Can you talk a little bit about this piece because it does resonate? This piece, Mass Transmission, really resonates today, really even more than when it was premiered.
Well, thanks for mentioning that piece. This is a piece for chorus, organ, and electronics. that was premiered in 2012 on the San Francisco Symphony's Mavericks Festival. And Donato conducted the premiere, and Paul Jacobs played the organ, and the San Francisco Symphony Chorus sang. Um, why that piece? How did it come about? I actually had just approached the symphony about it because um, I was consumed with this idea of writing a kind of choral organ um, collision between a kind of toccata and a mass that would have something to do with human connection in the modern age. And I've spent a lot of time researching how do you tell that story? What are you talking about? I think what it meant, sometimes people say like Picasso is like all about different angles, and then somebody might say like an artist, no, he's like flatness and brown and tan. So musically, what I want to do, I think I wanted to have indigenous kinds of grooves mixed with electronic music and choral music. And so that was the story that I wanted to use to tell that. I found this amazing story um, of early Dutch transmissions from Holland all the way to their colony in Java. This is 100% like sending a message to the moon. I mean, it's just like it. There were children sent to be in the colony of Java, and their parents were like connected over long range radio transmissions. And there was this marvelous memoir that was written just like in the 22 or something, 1922, about a mother communicating with her daughter. And it's very poetic. Um, and I set that for chorus, organ, and electronica that starts in the Dutch telegraph office. The middle movement is from Java, from the child's perspective, and it goes back to telegraph office at the end. It's kind of what we're doing right now. We're communicating over these stupid, uh, communication platforms which bring us together. I mean, I say stupid just because we're all like, okay, great. Um, but they really do remind us how far we are. Every stutter, every like, you're like, wait, I didn't quite catch that. The most important thing is what? Oh, really? And so that's actually interesting that it's been going on for 100 years. And so, unfortunately, choral music right now is probably considered like a weapon because it's all about singing and projecting air. Um, I can't wait for choruses to get back together. My heart goes out to all the choral musicians and singers who feel like they are persona non grata right now because you just can't be projecting air in a space with other singers. Man, when we get back, it's going to be so great to hear those voices again.
I absolutely agree, and to see in many ways, we look towards Europe, at least at the moment, for
Funding?
for funding and for guidance in producing concerts. And there are, of course, performances. There has been two performances of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony that I've seen broadcast live stream from Europe. And I just to hear that piece being done, when 6 months ago we thought that might never happen again. So it's the future is hopeful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It's been tough, honestly. Emotionally, it's tough to be told just a little longer now, and then it stretches out, and you see so many friends having such a hard time. Um, we will get there. I will just say that if you're listening and you're part of an organization that you know orchestra, opera house, whatever chorus, um, don't give up. Like program what you can do. Use your outdoor spaces. Really, really get creative. We have to not just say, "Hey, we're canceling the rest of our season." Find a way to offer something. Why? Because we need to have a middle ground between then and the fall of 21. Fall of 21, we have to get back to normal. And I would like to use the spring to, you know, find creative ways to do things so that we're not still doing this kind of Brady Bunch stuff on TV screens a year from now. There is hope. We have a responsibility in our field to show the way forward. I think we can do it.
I absolutely, and I have hope that it's we're talking about this earlier, that a lot of organizations that we are a part of, we have been a part of, are integrating and engaging with their audiences and showing ways forward without just canceling.
Well, you all, especially in California Symphony, um, why is that? I think those orchestras are more lean I mean, not like you guys are lean, but you're you don't have some incredibly, it's hard to turn if you're a cruise ship. You ever seen a cruise ship just do a donut? Never. um, it's hard. And I can only imagine, just trying to know what I don't know. If I was running a large organization, it's so much easier, and to just say, okay, we're going to just fold up. Um, and I know they want to do bigger things. Still, though, we've got a lot of outdoor spaces. Tanglewood, Kennedy Center. Um, please don't let obsessive legal stuff stop you from thinking creatively. People really want to hear music. I don't really look forward to going to a concert hall that looks like a Halloween party with masks and ushers with rubber gloves, looking like some kind of nightmare. Um, Probably have to like be a little more tolerant though. To just That's going to be part of it a little bit. Let's get to. Let's just think about the spring as a time when we can start really moving into performance. In whatever way we can.
Well, thank you, Mason, for.
Is this it? Really?
I think. Well, we can. Actually, there is one other question I wanted to. One other topic I wanted to bring up because it's affected you obviously, which is. Um, Steve Jobs, which is your fantastic opera that I have loved ever since you told me about the project. And of course, it was this summer that it was going to be performed at San Francisco Opera, but it has had it was premiered at Opera San Jose, or excuse me, Santa Fe Opera, and Seattle Opera had a run of performances. But talk a little bit about this piece, since we are where we are right now is very close to where Steve Jobs lived, and
Should we go to his house?
yeah, we can. This is just down the
I know
street.
where he is. Yeah, Steve, if you're listening, please fix this phone crap. I want a landline that I want that kind of sound. The Steve Jobs continues to loom large, and I think because unlike any other person that has run a company with that much impact, he really was like an artist, with all the warts that go with that. Really difficult person, um, but so perfectionistic that if he pulled out a prototype of the iPhone and it had scratches on the plastic, he would say, "I want it in glass. I want it in 6 weeks," and everybody's fired if that doesn't happen. That's bad human being qualities to be that intense with people. Fascinating as a contributor to humanity, and also fascinating as an opera. Kind of like Tony Soprano, he's sort of like the antagonist and protagonist of his own piece. Steve Jobs searched for simplicity, did not achieve that. He was very busy in his inner mind. Buddhism throughout his life, his spiritual mentor Kobun, so eloquently brought to life by librettist Mark Campbell, and his wife Lorene Campbell really grounded him. That piece is going to receive its second production by a wonderful consortium in Atlanta and Austin and Kansas City Opera. It's going to happen this January, but of course we're going to wait. And I hope that it comes back to San Francisco Opera. It's something we think about a lot more and more, how we integrate with technology. And I do think even if Steve Jobs did not get there himself, he was obsessed with how we stay human while we continually cede part of our souls to this digital world. And we're all seeing that more and more now. Sometimes you just have to meet in the backyard and, see a friend and call some people that they're artists, and reconnect. So thanks for asking about that. I look forward to the next direction of that by Tomer Zukin.
Wonderful, Mason. This is it. I promise. Thank you so much for joining all of us here on MusicWise. It's every week has been such a pleasure to talk with a friend, and this week was no different. So
Wait,
thank you.
look, is that an asteroid coming towards the screen? Thank you. Sorry, a little punchy. It's the first time I've hung out with Donato in ages. So thanks for listening.
Thanks everyone.